After that, the story settles into something quieter. It stops being told with excitement and starts being told with understanding. People don't bring it up to hype it anymore. They bring it up when someone's confused about what real capability looks like. When someone asks why certain people never seem rushed, why some men don't posture, why a few people can walk into any room and instantly lower the temperature. That's why, someone will say. Because when you don't need to. Michael becomes part of the background of the gym in the best way possible. Not invisible, just steady, predictable, respectable. The kind of presence that makes other people train a little cleaner without knowing why. No one crowds his space. No one interrupts his sets. No one jokes at his expense. Not out of fear, out of instinct. It's the same instinct animals have around something they don't fully understand but deeply respect. Occasionally, someone new asks him for advice. Not about fighting, about discipline, about recovery, about longevity. How do you still move like that? How do you avoid injuries? How do you stay sharp? His answers are never dramatic. Consistency, listening, knowing when not to push. Those answers disappoint the people looking for shortcuts. They satisfy the people who are ready to grow up. And that's the dividing line. The loud ones fade out over time. They chase new gyms, new crowds, new mirrors. The quiet ones stay. They build. They learn. They last. The guy who tested him, he ends up becoming one of the most respectful people in the room. Not talkative, not showy, just serious. Focus changed. One night, as they're both leaving, he finally says it. Hey, thanks for not hurting me. Michael looks at him, genuinely surprised. There was no reason to, he says. That's it. No lesson speech, no reminder, no ego, just truth. And that's the part that sticks with him long after the soreness fades. Because getting beaten teaches you one thing. Getting spared teaches you something deeper. It teaches you that power doesn't need to announce itself. It teaches you that skill doesn't crave attention. It teaches you that the most dangerous people are usually the calmest ones in the room. Years pass. The gym changes owners. New equipment. New faces. Same story, quieter every time it's told. But it never disappears. Because stories like that aren't about violence. They're about perspective. They're about realizing that the line between confidence and arrogance is thinner than most people think, and that once you cross it, you don't always get to choose who corrects you. That day didn't create fear, it created clarity, and clarity, once earned, never leaves. Let's rewind for a moment, because you need to understand something. Steven wasn't in Las Vegas for vacation. He wasn't there for a movie premiere. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there on unofficial business, the kind most people never hear about. 2 days earlier, his phone had rung at 3 a.m., It was a close friend, a former Marine named David, someone Steven had known for over 20 years, a man who'd saved his life once overseas. His voice was shaking on the call, something Steven had never heard before. Steven, they're going after my daughter. Those words changed everything. David owned a small security company in Nevada, honest work, clean reputation. But 3 months ago he'd been approached. A local crime syndicate wanted him to work for them, provide security for their operations. Look the other way when needed. David refused. He had principles. He had honor. He wouldn't compromise either. That refusal cost him. First, they vandalized his office. Then they threatened his employees. Then they started following his 16-year-old daughter to school. That's when David called Steven. Because when you're desperate and the law can't help fast enough, you call someone who can. Steven didn't hesitate even for a second. I'm coming. He booked a flight that same morning. Told no one where he was going. No press announcements. No social media posts. Just a quiet arrival in Las Vegas. He wanted to see the situation firsthand. Understand who was threatening his friend. Learn their patterns, their faces, their methods. That's why he was in that casino. It wasn't random. The casino was owned by the same people threatening David's family. A front for much darker operations happening behind closed doors. Steven wasn't there to gamble. He was there to observe, to watch how they operated, to identify the key players, to understand the hierarchy. Professional criminals always reveal themselves if you know what to look for. How they talk to staff, who shows them respect, who fears them. But Steven didn't expect them to approach him first. He thought he'd blend in, stay invisible, gather information quietly. Instead, they came straight to him. Because that table, it was reserved every Friday night for men connected to Dmitry Volkov, a name that made people in Nevada very nervous. A man with connections to organized crime across 3 states. What would you do if someone threatened you in public like this? Would you stand your ground or walk away? The man behind Steven tapped his shoulder again, harder this time, more aggressive. Last chance, old man. Steven turned slowly in his seat, his movements calm, deliberate. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were sharp, focused, reading everything. I'll leave when I'm ready. The second man laughed, a cold, mocking sound. You know who we work for? Steven's voice stayed flat. Nog. Dmitry Volkov. The name was supposed to make him react, supposed to make him scared. Steven nodded slightly. Never heard of him. That was the trigger. The moment everything shifted, the third man stepped forward fast, his patience gone. He grabbed Steven's shoulder hard, trying to physically pull him up from the chair. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Steven stood smoothly, used the man's own grip against him, redirected his momentum with perfect precision. Aikido isn't about strength. It's about using your opponent's force. The man hit the casino floor hard, his shoulder slamming into the carpet. The sound echoed. The entire casino froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Slot machines kept ringing, but nobody heard them. Security personnel started moving toward the commotion, their radios crackling. But the two other men didn't back off. They weren't scared. They were angry. They circled Steven from both sides, trying to box him in, trap him. One cracked his knuckles. The other loosened his jacket. Big mistake. One whispered through clenched teeth. Steven didn't respond with words. He just waited, centered, balanced, ready for whatever came next. Have you ever stayed calm when everyone expected you to panic? What would you do surrounded by multiple attackers? The second man swung, a wide, aggressive punch aimed at Steven's face. Steven sidestepped smoothly, grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted with controlled force. The man dropped to one knee immediately, gasping in pain, his wrist bent at an unnatural angle. The third man didn't attack. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket. Everyone tensed. But it wasn't a weapon. It was a phone. He was calling for backup, reinforcements, more people, more violence. Steven didn't try to stop him. He wanted them to call, because this wasn't about winning a fight in a casino. This was about sending a message that would reach all the way to Dmitry Volkov himself. Within 3 minutes, 6 more men arrived, pushing through the crowd, moving with purpose. They formed a circle around Steven, blocking every exit. The crowd had completely cleared now. Phones were recording from safe distances. Casino staff stood frozen against the walls. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody wanted to get involved. One of the new arrivals smirked confidently. You just signed your death warrant. Steven's voice cut through the tension. Quiet but clear. No, you did. What happens when the prey becomes the predator? Before the situation could escalate any further, someone new entered the scene. The casino manager appeared, pushing through the circle of men. A sharp-dressed man in his 50s, expensive suit, perfectly groomed. He'd clearly been watching the security cameras, knew exactly what was happening. What's going on here? His voice carried authority, the kind that usually stopped problems immediately. One of Volkov's men pointed directly at Steven, his finger jabbing the air. This guy attacked us. He assaulted my associate unprovoked. We want him arrested. The manager's eyes moved to Steven, taking in his appearance, the worn jeans, the plain black shirt, the calm expression. Then his face changed completely. Recognition hit him like a physical blow. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly. Color drained from his cheeks. Mr. Seagal. The name hung in the air. 2 simple words that changed everything. The room shifted instantly. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Did he say Seagal? Steven Seagal. The actor. The martial artist. Phones came out everywhere, cameras pointing, recording. This was about to go viral. Volkov's men hesitated, their confidence cracking. They looked at each other, uncertainty replacing aggression. This wasn't some random tourist anymore. This was someone known, someone with reach, someone with influence. Steven didn't move from his position, didn't acknowledge the recognition. His voice remained calm and measured. These men were just leaving. The manager nodded quickly, too quickly, almost desperately. Absolutely, Mr. Seagal, absolutely. He turned to Volkov's crew. Gentlemen, please exit the premises now. But the lead enforcer wasn't done. His pride was wounded, his reputation damaged. He couldn't just walk away. Not in front of everyone. Not on camera. Volkov's going to hear about this. His voice tried to sound threatening, but there was a tremor underneath. Steven met his eyes directly. No blinking, no hesitation. A pause. Tell him I'll be at his office tomorrow. Noon. The silence was deafening. People stopped breathing. The enforcer's face went pale. Nobody challenged Dmitry Volkov. Nobody invited themselves to his office. It was insane. It was suicide. You don't know what you're doing. Steven's expression didn't change. I know exactly what I'm doing. The enforcer opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Finally, he turned, motioned to his crew. They left, slower than they'd arrived, looking back over their shoulders, trying to salvage some dignity, failing completely. And this was only the beginning. As the crowd began to disperse, the manager approached Steven quietly, nervously. Mr. Seagal, I apologize for any inconvenience. Can I offer you anything? Complimentary suite, dinner. Steven shook his head. I'm fine. Please at least let me. I said I'm fine. The manager nodded and backed away, smart enough to know when to stop talking. But Steven knew the truth. The men would be back, not tonight, but soon. With more people, with weapons, with orders from Volkov himself. Because men like Dmitry Volkov don't accept disrespect. They don't tolerate challenges. They respond with overwhelming force. To send their own message, to maintain their reputation. That night, Steven didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel room reviewing everything. Everything David had told him, names scribbled on notepads, locations marked on maps, patterns emerging from the chaos. Volkov's operation was bigger than he'd expected. Much bigger. He wasn't just threatening one family. The security company was just the surface. Underneath was something darker, something more organized. Steven found connections too. Money laundering through multiple casinos, protection rackets targeting small businesses, loan sharking with impossible interest rates. And then he found something worse. Evidence David had secretly gathered, photos, documents, testimonies from terrified witnesses. Volkov was running a trafficking network, moving people across state lines. Women promised jobs that didn't exist, children who disappeared from border towns, families destroyed, lives stolen. Steven's jaw tightened as he read, his hands gripping the papers. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. This wasn't about protecting one friend. This was about justice. Real justice. The kind that doesn't wait for court dates. The kind that acts. He looked at the clock. 20:47 a.m. In 9 hours he'd walk into Volkov's office. But not the way they expected. Not alone. Not unprepared. He picked up his phone. Made a call. Someone answered on the first ring. It's Steven. I need your help. The next morning, Steven didn't go to Volkov's office. Not yet. He went somewhere else first. The FBI field office in downtown Las Vegas. A plain government building that most tourists never noticed. He'd worked with federal agents before. Years ago, as a reserve deputy sheriff. As a consultant on organized crime cases. As someone who understood violence in ways most agents never would. He had contacts. People who trusted him. People who owed him favors. Agent Sarah Chen met him in a secured room. Soundproof walls, no windows. Just a table and 2 chairs. She was in her early 40s. Sharp. Professional. 20 years with the Bureau. Specialized in organized crime and human trafficking. Steven, what brings you here? He slid a folder across the table. Thick with papers. Photos, evidence David had collected over months. One word written on the cover. Dmitry Volkov. Her expression hardened immediately. Her body language changed. She knew that name. Knew it well. We've been watching him for 2 years. Steven leaned forward. Then why is he still operating? No witnesses willing to testify. No evidence that holds up in court. Everyone's too scared to talk. She paused. 3 people who agreed to cooperate disappeared. 1 turned up in the desert. The other 2 were never found. Volkov's lawyers are expensive and ruthless. Every case falls apart before trial. Steven's voice stayed calm, but his eyes showed fire. I'm not scared. Chen studied him carefully, reading his face, his posture, his determination. What are you proposing? Let me meet with him. Wear a wire. Get him talking. Get him confessing. Chen shook her head immediately. That's extremely dangerous. Steven, he'll have you searched. If people aren't amateurs, if they find a wire, you're dead. Steven didn't blink. I've done worse. In worse places. With worse people. Chen stood up, paced the small room. Thinking, calculating. Weighing the risks against the potential reward. Finally, she stopped, looked at him directly. If we do this, you follow our rules. You don't improvise. You don't play hero. You get what we need and you get out. Steven nodded once. Agreed. She sat back down. Give me 24 hours to set this up properly. We'll wire the room, not you. Plant devices he won't find. Directional microphones. Hidden cameras. We'll have tactical teams positioned nearby. Anything goes wrong, we move in immediately? Steven agreed. But he had one condition. David's daughter gets protection. Full witness protection if needed. I don't do this unless his family is safe. Chen nodded. Already arranged. Protective detail went to his house this morning. Relief crossed Steven's face briefly. Then it was gone. Back to focus. Back to the mission. Should people risk their lives to stop evil when authorities can't act fast enough? 2 days later, everything was ready. Steven walked into Volkov's restaurant, a high-end establishment on the strip, Dimitri's, in gold letters above the entrance, a front for his real operations, expensive Italian food, private rooms. Politicians and celebrities ate there, none of them knowing what happened in the basement or in the offices upstairs. The hostess greeted Steven, young, beautiful, nervous. Do you have a reservation? Tell Dimitri that Steven Seagal is here to see him. Her eyes widened. She picked up a phone, whispered into it, listened, hung up. Follow me, please. She led him through the restaurant, past tables of well-dressed diners, past the kitchen, to a private elevator in the back. She pressed the button for the 3rd floor. The doors closed. Steven was alone now. He knew FBI agents were listening, watching from surveillance points across the street, ready to move. But in this elevator climbing toward Volkov, he was on his own. The doors opened. 2 bodyguards stood waiting, both over 6 feet, both armed, arms up. They searched him thoroughly, patted down his jacket, his pants, checked his shoes, found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. The wire wasn't on Steven. It was already in Volkov's office, planted by FBI technicians disguised as maintenance workers. One bodyguard nodded. This way. They walked down a hallway. Thick carpet, expensive art on the walls, everything designed to intimidate, to show power, to remind visitors who was in control. They stopped at large double doors, opened them. Steven walked inside. The office was massive floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the entire strip, and behind a large mahogany desk sat Dmitry Volkov, mid-50s, gray hair slicked back, cold blue eyes that had seen terrible things, done terrible things, an expensive watch on his wrist, a cigar burning in an ashtray. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Mr. Seagal, I didn't expect you to actually come. Steven sat down without being invited. I'm here to make this simple. Volkov's smile widened, but it was the smile of a predator. Simple how? Steven leaned back in the chair. His posture relaxed, but his eyes never left Volkov's face. You leave my friend and his family alone. Permanently. Volkov picked up his cigar, took a long, slow drag, blew smoke toward the ceiling. He was enjoying this, the power dynamic, the control. And why would I do that? His voice was smooth, confident, like a man who'd never lost a negotiation. Steven's response was direct, cold. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what you're really running here. The smile on Volkov's face faded slightly. His eyes narrowed. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Volkov set the cigar down carefully, deliberately, each movement calculated. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled. You think because you're famous, you're untouchable. You think your movies make you special. You think people care. Steven's voice didn't rise, didn't waver, no. I think because you're arrogant, you've gotten sloppy. Volkov's jaw tightened. That hit a nerve. Sloppy? You operate in plain sight. You threaten families in a city full of cameras. You use the same restaurants, same casinos, same routes. Patterns, Dmitri. You've created patterns. Volkov stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Steven remained seated, calm. Trafficking, extortion, murder. He paused. Let each word land. I know exactly who you are. The room went completely silent. Even the bodyguards by the door shifted uncomfortably. Volkov's face darkened, red creeping up his neck, veins visible at his temples. His hand moved slowly toward a drawer. The same drawer he always kept a weapon in. Everyone knew it. Steven didn't flinch, didn't move. I wouldn't. Volkov's hand froze, hovering above the drawer handle. Why not? Because there are 3 federal agents positioned outside this building. 2 more in the restaurant below. And you're being recorded right now? Volkov's eyes went wide, real fear flashing across his face for the first time. You're bluffing. Steven reached up slowly, pulled his collar to the side. There was nothing there, no wire, no device. Volkov's confidence started returning. I knew it. The wire isn't on me, Dmitri. Steven's eyes moved deliberately around the room. The painting on the wall, the bookshelf, the smoke detector. It's in here. Volkov's face turned pale, completely white. His eyes darted around his own office, the place he felt safest, the place he controlled, violated, compromised, betrayed by his own space. You just destroyed yourself, he hissed, his voice shaking now. They'll kill you before you leave this building. Steven stood slowly. No, Dmitri. I just saved a lot of lives. And ended your operation. If you believe standing up to evil is always worth it, like this, would you risk everything to protect innocent people? Seconds later, the double doors burst open. Agents in FBI jackets flooded the room, guns drawn, tactical gear. Moving with precision. Dmitri Volkov, you're under arrest. Hands where we can see them. The bodyguards didn't resist. They knew better. Hands went up immediately. Weapons placed on the ground. Volkov stood frozen behind his desk, his empire crumbling in real time. Everything he'd built, everything he'd protected, gone. An agent moved behind him, pulled his arms back. Handcuffs clicked into place. Volkov's eyes locked on Steven, pure hatred burning there. This isn't over. His voice was venom, a promise, a threat. Steven met his gaze without emotion. Yes, it is. As Volkov was led toward the door, he tried one last time. You don't know who I'm connected to. You don't know how deep this goes. They'll come for you. They'll come for everyone you love. Steven stepped closer, close enough to whisper, but loud enough for the recording devices to catch. Let them come. Volkov was escorted out, his expensive shoes dragging against the carpet, his perfect suit wrinkled from the cuffs, his power stripped away. Agent Sarah Chen approached Steven, her expression serious. That was reckless. Steven looked at her. It worked. Barely. Did you get what you needed? Chen nodded slowly. He admitted to trafficking. Mentioned the protection rackets. Referenced 3 murders indirectly. Plus everything we caught when his bodyguards started talking to each other in Russian. She paused. This is enough to put him away for life. Maybe several lifetimes. Steven nodded. How many people did we just save? Chen's expression softened slightly. Based on what we found in his other properties. At least 40 currently. Maybe hundreds over the next few years. Steven's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then it was worth it. But Chen wasn't finished. Her face grew serious again. There's something else you need to know. What? Volkov wasn't working alone. He has partners. Bigger ones. People with more money, more connections, more reach. Steven's expression hardened again. The relief vanishing. Then we're not done. 3 weeks later, Steven stood outside his friend's house. A modest home in a quiet Las Vegas suburb. The kind of neighborhood where kids played in the streets, where people knew their neighbors, where life was supposed to be safe. The Marine David opened the door. His face looked different now. The stress lines had faded. The fear in his eyes was gone. He could sleep again, breathe again, live again. His 16-year-old daughter ran up behind him. She saw Steven and smiled wide. Ran straight to him and hugged his leg tight. The kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. Thank you, David said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Steven knelt down to the girl's level, looked her in the eyes. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you. Nobody's going to scare you anymore. She nodded, still smiling, then ran back inside to her room, back to being a normal teenager, back to worrying about homework and friends, not men following her to school. Steven stood and faced David directly, man to man, brother to brother. Volkov's partners are being rounded up. The FBI says it'll take time, but the network is collapsing. They found operations in 6 states. Over 100 victims recovered so far, more every day. David's eyes filled with emotion, tears he'd been holding back for months. I don't know how to repay you. I don't have money or... Steven shook his head firmly. Cut him off. You already did. David looked confused. How? You asked for help. That took courage. Most people suffer in silence. They're too proud or too scared. You put your ego aside to protect your daughter. That's what a real man does. They shook hands. A firm grip. A bond deeper than words. Steven walked to his car. But before he got in, David called out. Steven. He turned. Why did you do all this? You could have just made some calls. Sent money for private security. Why risk your life? Steven paused. Thought about the question. Really thought about it. Because when you have power, you have responsibility. Simple as that. He got in his car, started the engine, but sat there for a moment before driving away. thinking about everything that had happened, the casino confrontation, the risk of wearing a wire. The moment Volkov realized he was caught, some people asked him later why he did it. Why risk everything for one family? Why get involved when it wasn't his problem? His answer was always the same, always simple, always honest. Because when you have power, you have responsibility. I didn't walk into that casino to prove I could fight. I've been fighting my whole life. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I walked in to prove that people who abuse power will always face consequences. That bullies don't win just because they're loud. That evil doesn't triumph just because good people stay silent. He thought about all the victims they'd found. Women promised jobs that never existed. Children stolen from families. People treated like products instead of human beings. Respect isn't given because of fame, he realized. It's not about how many movies you've made or how many fights you've won. It's given because of character. And character is what you do when no one's watching, or when everyone's watching and you still do the right thing. Because that's what separated Steven from men like Volkov. Volkov had power, money, connections, fear, but he had no character. He used his power to destroy, to control, to profit from suffering. Steven had power too, skills, fame, connections, but he used it differently, to protect, to defend, to give voice to people who had none. That's what made the difference. Not strength, not skill, not fame, character. The willingness to act when action was needed. The courage to stand when others sat. The refusal to look away from injustice just because it was easier. Steven drove away from David's house that day, but he carried something with him. The knowledge that one person can make a difference. That standing up matters. That courage is contagious. And that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be silent.